Welcome to the Kindling Spirit Podcast.
Let's go ahead and jump in. Oh, what you got?
We're double duty. We're doing the Wisdom of Yoga call and we're doing the podcast here, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I forgot we're going to be recording another podcast episode, so you're gonna hear this in different ways from different places. So on the podcast side of things, I'm Brenton,
And I'm Rachelle.
and we're going to be talking about we're going to talk about yoga off the mat. We're going to talk about fire and water. We're going to talk about social justice and how to not be an asshole in today's world in some ways too. So
Mhm.
all kind of wrapped together. But let's start with some practice because I appreciate the container of practice here. So I'm gonna open us with some guidance, and Rochelle's gonna bring us out. Unless there's anything else you want to mention before we jump in, Rochelle. All right, cool. So before we do anything else, I invite you to keep your eyes open for the first part of this practice. And you don't have to look at the screen, you can look anywhere else. But we're going to attune ourselves to the sense of fire for a moment here. And so fire is connected with our sense of sight. And so I just want you can kind of let your eyes wander around the room as you just contemplate for a moment the fact that you see things because light is reflected. It's kind of like a fire kind of movement there. You might notice digital fire and light. You might notice sunlight. You might even have a candle lit. But noticing how you can keep your eyes open and you can begin to move your attention inward even with your eyes open. And so inviting you to attune to a sense of warmth inside. Attuning to the reality that as you breathe in, the air's a little bit cooler, but as you breathe out, the air's a little bit warmer. That there's a sense of heat and vitality inside of you. And you can go ahead and let your eyes close now if it feels safe. And I want you to notice how immediately when you close your eyes, your attention does two things. It kind of expands and it contracts at the same time. And this expanded sense of awareness is a fire quality, an opening, a reaching outward. It's like desire. Whereas that sense of contraction is water. Like water that pools together, that flows to a lowest point. See if you can connect with that sense of contraction inside. There's fluid in your body. There's blood pumping through your heart and veins. Water in your kidneys and bladder. But there's also a deeper sense of these elements. There's a sense of flow and balance inside that exists in your body as well as your mind. There's a sense of flow inside and out, like rivers that move from a higher non-physical place that rush into form at their own speed. And by that same token, there's also a metaphysical sense of fire inside, a sense of desire, of radiance, of activation. Just taking a minute to attune to these different energies, these ways that these elements show up in our bodies, our minds, our lives. And the last thing I invite you to do as we begin to come back is to just take a moment and to imagine what it would be like if there was only winter, if there was only water, if there wasn't a sense of light for reflection, a sense of movement or energy. There was only still water, cold, unmoving. Some parts of it likely feel good, and yet other parts maybe not so much. And then by that same token, imagining for a moment, what if there was only summer? What if there was only fire, only light? Again, it might feel good at first, warmth, light, perpetually, until things begin to dry out. Imagine if there was only desire without fulfillment. And maybe taking a moment to find gratitude for the fact that we have a balance of these elements inside of us and around us. And that yoga, this path that we explore, helps us to stay and find that balance. So keeping that sense of fire and water inside as you come on back. So we're going to jump into a conversation here.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to why we thought this topic in particular, it follows the book that we've been working on in our Wisdom of Yoga study group, and why we thought Tapas and Svadhyaya, which we'll define here in a moment, is relevant to our podcast and relevant to action in the world and social justice and this time in history. We'll start with tapas, and there's a number of different interpretations of what it means. The one that I landed on that I like the most is to heat or glow of transformation. And that's my favorite. Tapas is also associated with purification, which I don't like because it's been misused. Purification has been misused in the kind of like expansion of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And austerity is also often used with tapas. And that can be a really rigid, more kind of fundamentalist, very stripped down practice. It's not very interesting to most people, too. So
austerity sounds like it goes right with yogic ethics.
Yeah, very tasty.
Yeah, more dry sand in my mouth, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of tapas meaning to heat or to glow. I've never heard those definitions of it before. I know that, we touched on how tapas relates to fire. I love how one of the oldest Hindu texts, the Rig Veda, describes how tapas is basically the creation. It's one of the few esoteric texts I found that uses fire as like the original element, and it talks about how it was the tapas of the creator that birthed basically everything into being. It's cool to think about it in terms of glowing like that. It's the OG glow.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. The explosion of stars or galaxies or, yeah.
The Big Bang.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was going to ask, maybe for some of your insight as to why tapas kind of fits in this flow of principles that we've been studying, from, kind of like a little review from the yamas to the niyamas. We're at this point where we're almost done with these personal observances and the ways that we're like holding kind of this ethical foundation in ourselves. And we're at this point where we're like at this kind of purifying fire in building our yoga foundation. So I wonder if you have any just thoughts about why tapas is kind of at the end of this line where something like ahimsa is maybe toward the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good question. So just to kind of review a little bit, the yamas we talk about as, I talk about as sort of external relational practices, and the niyamas as internal relational practices. And yeah, it's a good question. In some ways, tapas is sort of an element of each of the yamas and niyamas, right? We have to have some, what is the best word to use here? When we're engaging the yamas and the niyamas, there's some element of the heat of transformation that's happening. And I think the other piece that I would say about that is tapas, we have to be discerning in how much we practice, how much discipline, like this idea of purification or austerity. how much fire we bring to it. We have to be mindful of how much we bring in, because anything that we're attached to on either extreme kind of goes awry and will end up burning us. And so I like how it loops back to this idea of ahimsa, nonviolence. And if we're dealing with this fire, we also have to bring in this benevolence, this compassion, this nonviolence in the way that we're holding our practice with all of these things. We can't go in with a hard line. I don't think that'll work. I think it'll end up burning us. I'm curious if you have some more thoughts about the connections there.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to end up kind of talking about this again and again in this call. Yeah, I think right now what comes to mind is that, the tapas is really the honing of everything up to this point. It's the, to use that word, purifying, but it's the letting go of the things that maybe we thought would be part of this work or part of what would be helpful or part of what I would want or what I would need, and realizing that they're not, and that I can kind of hone and sharpen and focus. So for me, tapas is about focus, I guess, in this moment I'm realizing it. It's like, it's light that's been honed through a magnifying glass that can spark fire, that can ignite something to happen. But like you mentioned, with an unchecked magnifying glass, like give a 3-year-old a magnifying glass and teach them that they can start fires with it, and we're going to have a bad time. And we have those 3-year-old aspects inside of ourselves that say, well, I want this and I want this, and if I don't, I'm going to throw a tantrum. And then they grow up to be adults that do scary things and run countries.
Yeah. I want to bring Svadhyaya in. It's a weird kind of yogic word. It's hard to say, but this is kind of like self-reflection, I'll call it, self-study. And I think it's really importantly paired with tapas. And as you were talking, what came to mind is when we're working with these ethical practices, these external relational orientations and these internal relational orientations, those will naturally bring up this tapas. It will naturally start to burn away these blockages that we have, or these limiting socially conditioned beliefs. And the self-study also needs to be there. And that's what loops me back to ahimsa, which is like there's this softness that also needs to be held with. So all of these yamas and niyamas lead into the experience of tapas, the practice of tapas, and then the self-study sort of helps to round it out. And one other thing that I'll say about tapas is it's really bringing the mind and the body up against its own challenges in life. And it's building tenacity and endurance so that we can live a fuller life.
Wow.
Gandhi refers to this path overall as a constant heart churn, and it's intense. And I really like that description associated with tapas. It's like we're really digesting all of the elements of our lives and all of the experiences of the world. We're really running it through our heart and assessing what's true, what's right or wise action here.
And I like that he uses churn, which is kind of a liquidy term. And so it's like there's this secret, like, hey, you need to keep your fires in check whenever you're spinning them and doing that work. Since I know we have notes, I want to say, quote what you mentioned about what tapas is, and that it's related to any practice that challenges the mind and the body against its own limits.
Yeah.
And I think that just needs to be sat with for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's satya work, which I think is a lot of what Svadhyaya kind of, maybe where tapas kind of draws on ahimsa. Svadhyaya, like we have to have honesty in our introspection. We have to have honesty in the ways that we see ourselves, which is another reason community is beneficial, because if we're alone, we only ever get our own perspective of ourselves, and that can bounce around in your head forever. But when we're with other people, we get that more honest reflection. And what I'm trying to say is that if we're not careful and we misuse both of these at the same time, then our introspection is skin deep and it never goes anything past our ego, past our personality. And that reflection that's meant to keep tapas in check can actually inflame it and kind of enable it to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Power can grow out of control and be self-serving. And, you know, we've seen this in a lot of religious contexts. We've seen this in a lot of political contexts where there becomes this self-serving righteousness, self-serving righteousness. Yeah. And then that's how tapas really grows out of control. But I want to come back to that quote of like pitting the mind and the body against its own challenges and really kind of distill that down into day-to-day practice. What is that? You know, what does that look like? In a traditional yoga class, a traditional asana class, that looks like you're holding a posture that may be challenging because of your body's limitations in stretching or mobility or strength. And you're literally, quite literally feeling some sense of warmth or burn or right at the edge. And it's really clear that you don't want to push past that in a physical way because you'll hurt yourself, right? That's where there's too much tapas. On a mental level, I think it's much harder for people that haven't been studying yoga to really understand what that looks like. And here's where self-study comes in and self-knowledge and self-awareness comes in, because we have to know where our boundaries are. I use the target model, which is like the comfort zone and the stretch zone and the panic zone. And we're using our self-study to keep our tapas in the stretch zone. We don't want to go too far into the panic zone. We'll throw ourselves into a tizzy. And if we stay in the comfort zone, that's also not meant, it doesn't promote health and well-being.
I appreciate your mentioning that, because the question I was going to ask you was, how do we kind of walk what feels like a tightrope sometimes between tapas and svadhyaya and engage them both in a healthy way? And part of what I hear you saying is there really is this kind of sweet spot where we're stretching just enough, where we're working out our, inner muscles to the point where it's healthy but not causing harm or damage. What I hear you saying then is we're kind of in the sweet spot in between craving and aversion, because part of what I hear in that too is like, oh, I'm just going to either push away this stuff that I don't like, or I'm going to keep reaching for things that I want to get me out of this situation that I don't like. And either way, it's like what tapas is asking us to do is to sit in discomfort and just be with it without judging it as something that you want to get the hell away from.
Yeah.
Really tough for me to do. There are times where, particularly when my environment and the people in it don't, there's not this alignment with me and my beliefs and my values. That's really, really challenging for me to stay in those environments. I want to get away, and I can feel it. Like my body wants to get up and move out of it. But, and it's not to say that that's not important, right? There's times where we really need to get the hell out of bad situations.
Yeah.
And also, it's the svadhyaya that helps us to discern the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be different for every person and every moment, right? And we have to be mindful that we're not attached to like burning away everything and really purifying and stripping ourselves clean, because we will get burned in that experience. And I think about what are the little ways that we can work with tapas. And I think it's really looking at, just facing discomforts. On a mental health level, it's like, I'm going to sit with the grief, or I'm going to sit with the anger that's happening inside me, any uncomfortable emotions. I'm going to be present to it. I'm going to hold compassion for it, and I'm going to work with it in a really conscious way. Right. That's just that's kind of an internal mental health practice. And there are other ways. It can be anything from not eating chocolate cream pie It can be washing dishes. It can be going a little bit further on your hike. There's a lot of ways to work with it. And yeah, I'm curious if you have some other thoughts about just really concrete, simple ways to work with tapas, particularly on a mental level.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as we're recording this, I'm getting eaten alive by East Texas mosquitoes because it got really still and humid outside. And it's a tapas experience right now, just sitting and reminding myself that I and the mosquitoes are one. To answer your question, what comes to my mind is I think that sometimes working with the body is the best place to begin with some of these things because there are times when it's easy for me to kind of avoid things mentally. But if I'm working with my body, it's like there's this present moment, like undeniable experience that's happening. And so sometimes it's also a little bit more intense in that way. But I'm thinking fasting. Fasting, and you kind of mentioned this with like refraining from eating certain things, but fasting in general, I think, is such a powerful experience of attuning to my own body and what it wants and what it needs versus what my head is craving.
Yep.
And so that's like this profound experience of Svadhyaya and real, like clear seeing and introspection in that way with the difference between what my body actually needs in those moments versus what my brain is craving. So that's one of my favorite ways, I think, to do it. I think I have one more idea. Since I'm a mental health practitioner, I know that you've experienced this too. Sometimes sitting with a client that's in a dysregulated state is a really challenging experience too. And so it requires tapas as a helping professional to do everything from hold space for somebody else in the throes of a lot of fire or air or water or whatever else, but then also to remember that everybody else's experiences like that, I don't have to receive all of those things. I don't have to take those on. And that's a tapas kind of purifying, burning away type of experience too. A couple things that come to mind.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. One other thing I'll say about just kind of the experiential, what's the concrete work that you can do? You had mentioned craving and aversion, and I would say tapas is the practice of if you're feeling a craving, maybe hold back from that, and if you're feeling averse, maybe stepping towards that. That can be a mini practice of tapas and a kind of an internal gauge of how you know whether you're working with it in an appropriate way. And I just want to name a couple of quotes that I think are really cool and helpful and kind of feeds into this practice of Svadhyaya and it being, associated with the water element here. So this is a Ram Dass quote, and it's something that goes something like, if you're like, you're caught up in your ego, right? And you think, I'm going to step into the fire and really burn it all away. You will end up in water, and you'll kind of go with the flow of the water. And if you think like, oh, I want to get away from all of the suffering and no, and you're trying to step into the water, then you will end up in the fire and get burned. So that's a cool one. And then this other one I just found, this is a real sweet kind of poetic one. The fire you fight is the purifier you flee.
Okay, say that again.
The fire you fight, resist is another way to say it. The fire you resist is the purifier you flee.
That is so good. Wow. There's so much beautiful like balance in the ways that fire and water work together in our minds, in our bodies. And I think that one of the ways that we can like directly physically experience that is when we do heart work. Because in different traditions, it's like in some traditions, the heart's related to fire. In other traditions, the heart's related to water. And it's like this kind of alchemizing point where it's a point where liquid flows through in a constant point, from the moment we're born to the moment we die, water's moving through our heart through blood. Also, the heart is the only organ where there's this constant origination of electrical light activity that happens from the moment we're born to the moment we die. So there's this beautiful water and fire in the geometry of our heart itself. And when we keep our attentions on our heart and operate from the heart, I think it's harder to get caught in craving and aversion. It's easier to stay centered in connection and reflection and perspective, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. I think the mind is a place where craving and aversion arises, and the heart, not necessarily the case. The heart houses the spirit, so there's more clarity there. I'm glad that you kind of differentiated this. One of the things that is important to note is that we're talking about tapas on the level of the body, we're talking about tapas on the level of the mind, and another place of practice is with speech, and this kind of brings back the heart into it, is like, are we able to have clear speech and kind speech and compassionate and benevolence as we're talking, and truth? So all of these principles that we've just been talking about are here. And one other thing, this is maybe a little bit more esoteric. I'm kind of drawing in an overarching theme from the Bhagavad Gita. But this is kind of a bigger life tapas, which is renouncing the fruits of the actions. So we are doing our own self-study and seeing where we're coming from heart and where we're coming from spirit, and taking those action regardless of what the outcome is. That's a tapas practice. So whether you're going to work, or whether you're raising a child, or you're in a relationship, you're coming with heart and spirit and ethics or benevolence. All of that's coming forward, but we're not necessarily in control of, or attached to, or averse to what the result of that action is. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And it's very, I'm thinking of all the times that Krishna in the Gita basically tells Arjuna a version of that if you're caught up with, you know, the reason that you're doing things and the way you're going to look, once you do them, it's like you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and it's gonna bite you. Yeah. What comes to my mind in hearing you right now is, I feel like one of the easiest ways to ask or judge whether I'm in alignment with these yogic principles, these yamas and niyamas, is to ask, are my actions and choices making for a good ancestor? What am I trying to say? Am I making choices that are going to make me a good ancestor centuries down the road? That kind of Amish perspective, like the best time to plant a tree or to raise a family is 7 generations ago. The second best time is today.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And I think that takes us squarely into this practice of self-reflection. Really, where's our intention coming from? What pathway are we following? And that's where the water comes in to temper the tapas.
Yeah. And it happens in big ways as well as microscopic ways. And I think that that's kind of the theme too. It's that just as tapas is this moment to moment to moment like focus, yoga is a moment to moment to moment practice. It's not just something that turns on and turns off. And neither is benevolence or non-harming, neither is truthfulness, right? It's like the idea is that all of these sustain perpetually. They're not just these, oh, I'm going to be honest today, but tomorrow I'm going to be selfish and I'm going to make all these decisions for me and not worry about anybody else. It's like we can't do one and then do the other. And I think the ways that we've been enabling and supporting those ideas in a society is the reason that we're in some of these kind of chaotic places that we are now, because we keep excusing these kind of backsliding into, oh, we just don't need benevolence, it's fine. Oh, we don't need truthfulness, it's fine. And then we end up in destructive fire rather than purifying.
Yeah. I think some of the ancient texts are pretty clear. And I've found it in my own practice again and again and again. The human mind, the human ego, really likes to prize itself, right? And so we will constantly get caught again and again and again. And what's really cool about that is it gives us infinite number of ways to grow and transform. But what's not so cool about that is if we think we're in an empowered place, I've gotten enlightened, or I have power and I've got this clear vision, that's when we're trapped. That's when we're not doing the self-study. That, just as soon as like you're sitting in meditation and you're thinking, oh, I got this, you're actually out of the process, right? And this is where this self-reflection and introspection really starts to come in, is it, like you're saying, moment by moment by moment, it's just attuning to what's kind of bare, what's clear, what's actually happening in each moment. From a pretty deep place, right? Not from this conditioned layer place.
Yeah, from that place of noticing and witnessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
There's a little story from one of the Upanishads, and it's about the two birds. You've heard this, I'm sure. There's two birds sitting in a tree, right? And one flies around and eats all the berries and, has some sex and poops and, makes a nest and all of that. And the other one just witnesses, just watches. And this is this idea of getting caught in aversion and craving is the bird that's flying around having all of this. And it's not to say that we don't want to live our lives. We do. But we want to tune into, kind of drop up a plumb line or an anchor into that deep place inside of us, that true clear place that hasn't been conditioned, to be able to witness and see, oh, there's a poisonous berry. Oh, there's a good berry, right? And seeing all of the variations of life.
That this reminds me of something that we haven't talked about yet, and that's another way that fire kind of shows up in the Gita, and that's with Rajas guna. And that's kind of what I hear in these birds. It's like, and that's the thing about the gunas, like whether we're talking about truthfulness and sattvas guna, or that action-oriented Rajas guna, or that slovenly tamas guna, it's like we can be equally attached to them all. We can be equally destroyed by them all. And so there really is this honestly impossible balance of being and doing that is being a human on this planet. But I think that that's the thing about yoga. It's like it feels impossible, and it is impossible until it's not. And then you realize, oh, these things I've been running between back and forth are the exact same point. Have you had the experience in meditation or realization? I know that you have. Yeah.
Yeah.
We realize that this distance is non-existent. It's all right now.
Yeah. It sounds complicated in talking about it. Actually, talking about it is more complicated than practice of it sometimes. But you said something that just really dropped in for me. The difference between being and doing. And I think we can relate it here. Being maybe can be equated with this self-study practice, is this inner witnessing, right? And the doing is the action, right? Is the tapas. The doing is the tapas. So just wanted to throw that in as another way to kind of understand what it is that we're talking about here. The being enables us to have clarity and reflection and to polish the mirror about the actions that we're going to take.
So good. Yeah, if we only ever be, we have no perspective on doing. And if we only ever do, we have no perspective on being. Yeah. But we have to have them both for each other. Almost like there's meant to be inner and outer and balance and above and below and all of these trendy esoteric sayings that float around.
You have anything else that you want to share about self-study and the heat of transformation?
I think the only other thing that comes to mind that I think is worth mentioning is that for anybody listening that is also a helping professional, I think Tapas directly addresses this idea of spiritual bypass, which I also think is a rampant thing today. And I think what Tapas is asking us to do is to build the resilience of clear seeing. And to get to the point of clear sight, you have to burn a lot of stuff away. You really have to go from coal to diamonds, and that whole alchemical process. And you can't do it if you stay surface and then try to teach surface things. And the world needs deep, authentic, true, practicing, living teachings to come about these days.
Yeah. Spiritual bypass is an interesting one. And what it would look like is, I think, sort of detachment from different difficulties like anger or grief or something like that, as a tapas practice. But like you said, there's a superficiality to it. You're not actually diving in and facing the demons, the challenges, the suffering in the world. You're kind of floating above it. And then what happens, that's one way. And then also like deep, rigid austerity is another way, where on either end of the spectrum, where it gets totally out of control. And we have, people in religious sects like gurus or priests or something like that sexually molesting people. We've had something like this recently, right? So there's two ways where it can get out of control. And if there's this spiritual bypass, there's this self-aggrandizement of like, oh, I've done it, I'm great, and the rules don't apply to me, and all of that kind of thing. So
for sure. And then we have Deepak Chopra's out there, and then it takes a while for it to come to light, and then by the time we realize, it's far too late, because there's thousands of people in a lineage that have been abused. Yeah. Interesting times to be a yogi in the West, trying to bring this work about.
Yeah, and I would say it's sort of the distortion of these practices are pretty rampant, and I would say that you could say it's certain traditions, but I will also say, to be really, really honest, it's the human mind, and this is part of knowing us. Knowing ourselves is to recognize that we have all the potential of greatness and evil, right? And this is the piece right there. That's the tapas practice of saying, like, I am human. My human mind has the capacity for these distortions, and I want to continue to work with it and keep it in check.
Yeah. That's the deep, deep, deep awareness and the deep acceptance that really, I think, has to happen in order to really progress down this path. We have to, and not to warp it to the point that it becomes like original sin and we're all like just evil inherently, because that's not what this is about. Right?
No. Yeah.
But it is admitting monkey mind is a very real thing, and that there are also practices that can help to give a new experience.
Just full circle, that comes back to community, where we have these outer reflections of what's really going on with us, and keeps us humble and keeps us aware.
Yep. Which is part of, the whole system. And that's why we can't just piecemeal these things. We can't just practice asana and call ourselves yogi, because everything gets worse when we just tiptoe into this stuff. But when we have a community, when we have a sadhana and a practice, when we have a support system of, an inner resource, it's like all of these things make for health. But in the West, we decide that we don't need to go through the decade of spiritual discipline and earning these practices, and now we just give them away. And so it makes sense to me that a lot of people are looking to them but still struggling, because we're not fully integrating what these pathways are. But it doesn't mean that it's not possible.
Yeah. So if you feel complete with that, we can potentially transition into a closing practice. So I want to invite you to settle into a comfortable position. And here is a microcosm of self-awareness and also a little bit of heat practice. You want the posture that you're going to have a little bit of comfort in, and also awakeness, right? So there's that middle ground. Not too comfortable, but not too rigid. And if it feels comfortable for you, to go ahead and close your eyes and just tune to the breath for a moment. The breath, the lungs holding the heart, which is holding spirit. the doorway to spirit inside the heart. Feeling the rhythm of the breath supporting the beating of the heart. And access to the warm sun of the spirit, of the universal self deep inside our heart. There's this analogy that has been made that humans are like what is called God in a pot. I like the idea of light in a pot. So the light is inside our heart, and the rest of our body and mind is the pot. And in this moment, we're going to begin to witness all the parts of the pot. This pot is a mosaic. So all the parts of self, all the parts of mind and ego and body. And it's broken into thousands of different pieces. Some of these pieces are shards of sharp edges, dirty and ugly, opaque and dark. And some of these mosaic pieces are shards of mirror. But the mirror is illusory and it's just reflecting our ego back to us and the illusion of the world. So just studying ourself and all the different parts that make up our conditioning, that make up our mind and our body. Some of this mosaic are shards of colored or clear glass that allow us to see through the pot and into the light, deep into the heart and into the light, into spirit. There may be some refraction or some coloring, or there may be full, clear seeing. Noticing that the light inside is surrounded by this mosaic pot that is fractured and imperfect. Lots of different permutations and orientations, different perspectives, different facets of self. And when we have that grace to find a shard of the mosaic that is clear, that we can see through into the inner self, into the source within, we see that the pot is simultaneously empty and full. And we get a glimpse of that radiant sun of the universal self within. There's no need to destroy the pot. It's all meant to be there together. The beauty within and the challenges and the beauty of the challenges of this pot. And just take another minute or so to really explore all the facets, all the shadow sides of self, and all the clear parts of self, the work that you've already done in your life and put in to clear a window into spirit. And also using that light to reflect on the parts that are still opaque and covered in mud. And taking a final moment to feel the radiance of the inner self. Find one of those windows to see through and follow it into the heart. And feel that radiating sunlight energy. The warmth of spirit, the warmth of tapas. Reflecting on all these parts. Helping to transform them. Helping to see and know them. Gratitude to all these parts of the mosaic pot. And then begin resting your awareness just on the light in the heart, supported by the breath. And with each out breath, allowing the light that you found inside to beam out of those clear parts of your pot, radiating out into your world, into your life, back into this community. Reflecting back to you, your illuminated self, your introspective self. And when you feel ready, coming back to the relational field of this community. Feeling your body and your mind, housing the light inside, and bringing this light through to practice your own self-reflection, to practice your own heat transformation in the world. Thank you. So we'll take a moment if there's any final reflections or anything else that anyone wants to share about this practice or just the topic overall tonight.
Rachelle, I think your practices are profound. And what this simple, profound realization I had was that the parts of me, first of all, it was interesting to look at myself and the parts of me as different little stained glass pieces. But to notice that the parts of me that I can't see the light inside, there are parts that are not letting the light radiate outward, that it goes both ways.
Yeah.
And the parts of me that I can see inside to the light inside are the parts that I let the light out. Lots there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to go back to the topic of the evening, it's just the tapas practice is heating and warming this pot and these aspects and these shards. And so they will burn off the mud eventually, and they will burn off the color, and they will become really crystal clear at some point. So that is part of the practice. But we have to know where those dark parts are in order to shine the light in that direction.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I need to just kind of sit with that practice a little bit. I feel like a little bit like I do. I've done practices kind of moving my attention into my light body, and it feels kind of like that practice of kind of moving into an astral form and just kind of looking at the starlight and the places where the stars are a little bit dim and the places where they're shining outward and radiating.
Yeah. And then what do those places represent? How are they associated with our psyche and our emotions and our history? And
Yeah. Which ones are ready to be held in some tempering fire for a little bit?
Yeah.
Purifying.
Yeah.